a waitress finishing a late shift, never imagined that saving a stranger outside her restaurant would pull her into a world of danger, passion, and redemption. She didn't know he was a mafia boss, and she definitely didn't know he'd be the man to show her that love could heal even the deepest scars. The November air in Midtown Manhattan carried that sharp bite of winter's approach, the kind of cold that seeped through layers and settled in your bones. Neon signs flickered to life against the darkening sky, casting electric blues and reds across rain-slicked streets as the city shifted from day to night. The sidewalks churned with movement, business people rushing toward Grand Central, tourists snapping photos, street vendors packing up their carts. The city never stopped breathing, but for Ava Williams, it was just another exhausting double shift finally ending. She pushed through the back service door of Celestial, an upscale fusion restaurant where marble floors and crystal chandeliers made her worn sneakers feel out of place. The scent of truffle oil and expensive wine still clung to her black work vest and red blouse, and her feet throbbed from 12 hours of carrying trays, forcing smiles, and pretending not to notice when customers looked through her as if she were invisible. Still, there was a strange comfort in the routine. The predictable rhythm of work, subway, home, had become her armor against a world that had once hurt her too deeply. Ava wasn't one to feel sorry for herself. Her life was modest but purposeful. She lived with her grandmother in a small apartment in Queens, the same woman who'd raised her after her parents passed when she was 16. Nana always said she had a warrior's heart wrapped in gentle hands, and Ava carried that truth like a shield. But beneath her polite, professional demeanor, she kept something buried deep. The memory of her younger brother Marcus, laughing one moment and gone the next, killed by her ex-boyfriend during a confrontation that turned violent 3 years ago. It had taken her this long to even breathe without feeling the weight of that guilt, that fear. These days, she kept her head down and her heart locked away. No relationships, no risks, no chances for anyone to get close enough to destroy her again. She walked faster as a light rain began to fall, the kind of drizzle that made the city shimmer like something out of a noir film. The street reflected headlights and street lamps in wavering pools of gold and red. She was heading toward the Fifth Avenue subway station, her canvas bag slung over her shoulder, when she noticed a crowd gathering near a sleek black Mercedes idling at the curb. People stood in a loose circle, phones raised, recording, murmuring, but no one moved to help. Her stomach tightened. Someone's hurt. "Is anyone calling 911? A man's voice asked nervously. "I don't know, man. I'm not getting involved," someone else muttered. Ava dropped her bag without thinking and pushed through the circle of onlookers. A man lay sprawled on the wet pavement near the rear passenger door of the Mercedes' expensive tailored suit, polished leather shoes, a watch that probably cost more than her rent catching the streetlight. His face was ashen, lips tinged with an unnatural blue. His chest barely moved. "Sir, can you hear me?" she said, kneeling beside him on the cold, wet ground. Her voice was steady, trained by years of watching her grandmother care for neighbors, by instinct honed through trauma. No response. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse, but faint and irregular. Her training kicked in immediately, the CPR certification she'd gotten at community college, the first aid course she'd taken after Marcus died, desperate to feel like she could save someone, anyone. "Someone call 911 now," she commanded, her voice cutting through the murmurs. She tilted his head back gently, checked his airway, then positioned her hands over his chest and began compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm came naturally, mechanical. Her palms pressed against the fine fabric of his suit, her arms locked, her body weight driving each compression. The rain picked up, cold droplets sliding down her temples, soaking through her clothes. But she didn't stop. Around her, the crowd whispered in Korean English, a mix of languages she couldn't process. All she could hear was her own breathing, the count in her head, the distant wail of sirens. Come on, stay with me." When the man suddenly gasped, a strangled, desperate intake of air relief flooded through her so intensely she nearly sobbed. "That's it," she whispered, leaning close to his face. "You're okay. Help is coming." His eyes fluttered open for just a second, dark, intense, disoriented, and locked onto hers before closing again. The ambulance screamed to a stop moments later, red and white lights painting the scene in urgent colors. Paramedics jumped out, and Ava quickly stood back, giving them space but staying close. He's been unresponsive, weak pulse, possible cardiac event, she reported crisply, wiping rain from her face. I performed CPR for approximately 3 minutes before he regained consciousness. One of the paramedics glanced at her, taking in her restaurant uniform. You a nurse? No, but I'm certified. I can ride with you if you need an extra set of hands. Let's go. Rain drummed against the ambulance windows as they sped toward Mount Sinai Hospital, sirens blaring. Ava sat across from the stretcher, watching the monitors, watching his chest rise and fall with the oxygen mask secured over his face. For reasons she couldn't name, her heart raced not from adrenaline, but from something else, something deeper, as if saving this stranger's life had cracked open a door she'd bolted shut years ago. At the ER, organized chaos erupted. Doctors and nurses swarmed him, calling orders, checking vitals. Ava stepped back, her role complete, suddenly aware of how soaked and exhausted she was. She stood near the doorway, watching as they stabilized him under the bright, unforgiving hospital lights. He looked different now, not just a body on the pavement, but a person, handsome in a sharp, almost dangerous way. High cheekbones, strong jawline, dark hair slicked back even in unconsciousness. The kind of man who commanded attention without trying. A young doctor approached her, eyes wide with something that looked like fear mixed with respect. Do you know who that is? He asked quietly. Ava shook her head, wringing rain from her sleeve. No? Should I? The doctor glanced back at the trauma bay, then leaned in slightly. That's Min Ho, just Min Ho. He runs Koreatown, the whole underground. Her breath caught. She'd heard whispers, of course. Everyone in New York had. The Korean boss who controlled everything from the docks to the nightclubs, whose name alone made people look over their shoulders. But standing there, soaked and trembling from adrenaline, all Ava saw was a man who'd almost died on a sidewalk, while dozens of people stood by and filmed. Well, she said softly, meeting the doctor's eyes. Tonight he was just someone who needed help. And as she walked out of the hospital into the rain-soaked Manhattan night, Ava had no idea that the man whose life she'd saved would soon become the most dangerous thing she'd ever allowed into her carefully guarded heart. She saved the life of New York's most dangerous man, and she has no idea what she just set in motion. Will Min Ho hunt her down to silence the only witness to his vulnerability? Or will the waitress who saw him as human become the one person who can save him from himself? Smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because this story is about to get intense. Drop a comment. Would you have saved him if you knew who he was? Like this video if you're already hooked on this dangerous love story. Chapter 1 is coming up next, and trust me, the moment Min Ho wakes up and learns her name, everything changes. Let's go. The subway ride back to Queens felt longer than usual. Ava sat in the corner of the near-empty car, still damp from the rain, her reflection ghosting across the dark window. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Not from cold, but from the aftershock of what she'd done. She'd touched death tonight, pressed her palms against a stranger's chest, and pulled him back from whatever edge he'd been teetering on. Min Ho. He runs Koreatown. She didn't know what that meant exactly, but the doctor's face had said enough. The way his voice dropped to a whisper, the way the nurses exchanged glances when they heard the name, fear dressed up as professionalism. Her grandmother was asleep when she finally made it home, the apartment dark except for the warm glow of the hallway nightlight. Ava stood in the doorway of her tiny bedroom, still in her soaked uniform, staring at nothing. She should shower, change, sleep. But all she could see were those eyes the moment they'd opened and locked onto hers before the paramedics arrived. Intense, vulnerable, the eyes of a man who'd seen things she couldn't imagine. Why didn't anyone else help him? That question haunted her as she finally peeled off her wet clothes and stood under scalding water, trying to wash away the feeling that she'd just stepped into something irreversible. Across the city, in a private suite at Mount Sinai Hospital, Min Ho opened his eyes to the sterile white ceiling and the soft beeping of monitors. His chest ached, his throat burned. Every breath felt like dragging air through broken glass. Boss. The voice came from his right, low, controlled. Dangerous. Jung-soo, his second in command, stood beside the bed in an immaculate black suit, hands clasped behind his back. "You're awake." Min-ho tried to speak, but his voice came out as a rasp. "What? Happened?" "You collapsed outside the restaurant. Someone called it in." Jung-soo's expression remained carefully neutral. "The doctors say you were poisoned. Aconite. Slow acting. Another hour. And—" He didn't finish the sentence. Poisoned. The word settled into Min-ho's chest like a stone. He'd suspected for weeks that someone in his organization was moving against him, but to get this close— "Who found me?" Min-ho asked, each word an effort. Jung-soo hesitated, and something flickered behind his eyes, calculation masked as concern. "A waitress. Black girl. Early 20s. She performed CPR. Rode with you in the ambulance." He pulled out his phone, showing a grainy photo pulled from security footage, a young woman in a work vest and red shirt. Her face turned away from the camera. "She left before we could get more information." Min-ho closed his eyes, and there she was again. The memory crystallized with sudden clarity. Rain on his face, sirens in the distance, and her voice steady, fearless, cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. "Stay with me." Her hands on his chest, her eyes filled with a determination that had nothing to do with knowing who he was or what he controlled. She'd looked at him and seen a human being worth saving. No one had looked at him that way in years. "Find her," Min-ho said quietly. Jung-soo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Boss, whoever poisoned you is still out there. The Nakamuras are moving on our territory in Hell's Kitchen. And—" I said, "Find her." Min-ho's voice grew stronger, edged with the authority that had built an empire. "I want to know her name, where she lives, everything." A pause stretched between them, heavy with unspoken tension. "Of course," Jung-soo finally said, bowing his head slightly. "I'll have the information by morning." After Jung-soo left, Min-ho lay alone in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. His ribs ached where her hands had compressed his chest, bringing him back from the edge. He'd been ready to die, had accepted it the moment the poison took hold during his meeting, but she'd refused to let him go. Why? In Queens, Ava finally climbed into bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. She picked up her phone, hesitated, then typed into the search bar, "Min-ho Korean Koreatown." The results made her blood run cold. Photos of a man in expensive suits entering nightclubs and restaurants flanked by stone-faced security. News articles about unsolved crimes, territorial disputes, witnesses who refused to testify. Whispers of money laundering, protection rackets, violence that the NYPD couldn't prove but everyone knew was real. She'd saved a monster. Or had she? Because the man in those photos looked nothing like the dying stranger, whose eyes had met hers with something that looked almost like gratitude, vulnerability, humanity. Her phone rang suddenly, making her jump. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding. She answered. Silence on the other end. Then breathing controlled, measured. "Hello?" she whispered. "Ava Williams." A male voice, smooth but carrying an undercurrent of threat. Not Min-ho's voice. Someone else. "We know what you did tonight. We'll be in touch." The line went dead. Ava sat frozen, her entire body going cold. They knew her name. And somewhere across the city, Jung-soo stood in the hospital parking garage, putting away his burner phone, a cold smile playing at his lips. The girl was the perfect leverage Min-ho's weakness dressed up as salvation. And if Min-ho became distracted chasing after his savior, it would make Jung-soo's plan that much easier to execute. Across town, Min-ho lay awake, touching his chest where her hands had brought him back to life, having no idea that his second-in-command had just made the first move in a betrayal months in the planning. Ava didn't sleep. She sat on her bed until dawn broke over Queens, the phone call replaying in her mind. "We know what you did tonight. We'll be in touch." The voice hadn't been Min-ho's, she'd heard his rasped words in the ambulance. This was someone else, someone watching. When her grandmother knocked softly on her door at 7, Ava was already dressed for her shift, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Baby, you look like death," Nana said, her weathered hands reaching up to cup Ava's face. "What happened?" "Nothing, Nana. Just a long night." The lie tasted bitter. But what could she say? I saved a crime boss and now someone else is calling me? Her grandmother studied her with those knowing eyes that had seen through every lie Ava had ever told. Marcus used to get that same look when trouble was coming. The mention of her brother made Ava's throat tighten. I'm fine. Really. But she wasn't. And as she rode the subway back to Manhattan, every passenger felt like a threat. Every pair of eyes. Every person standing too close. At the hospital, Minho was already awake when Jung-soo entered with 3 other men, silent, dangerous shadows in tailored suits. The morning light streaming through the window did nothing to soften the tension crackling in the room. We ran the tests twice, Jung-soo said, placing a folder on the bed. Aconite. Wolfsbane. It was in your tea before the meeting with the Nakamura brothers. Minho's jaw tightened. The Nakamuras were supposed to be allies, partners in their shipping operations. They're making their move. That's what they want you to think. Jung-soo's voice was carefully neutral, but the preparation suggests someone on our side had access. Someone close. The implications hung heavy in the air. A traitor. Someone close enough to access his inner circle. Jung-soo let Minho draw his own conclusions while redirecting suspicion outward. Find them, Minho said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a death sentence. Already working on it. Jung-soo hesitated, then pulled out his phone. I have the information you requested. About the girl. Minho straightened despite the pain in his chest. Ava Williams, 26, works at Celestial as a waitress, lives in Queensbridge with her grandmother. Clean record except... Jung-soo paused, his expression darkening. Her younger brother was killed 3 years ago. Domestic violence situation with her ex-boyfriend. The ex is serving 25 to life. Minho's hands clenched the bedsheets. She'd saved him despite knowing what loss looked like, despite having every reason to walk away from violence. She's a liability, boss, one of the other men said. She saw you vulnerable. Word gets out that someone saved your life. Then word gets out, Minho interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. She saved my life when no one else would. I don't repay that with threats. Jung-soo's expression remained unreadable. What do you want us to do? Get me white orchids, the best in the city. Minho reached for the notepad on the bedside table, wincing at the movement. And paper. I'll write the note myself. At Celestial, the lunch rush was in full swing when the delivery arrived. Ava was carrying a tray of appetizers to table 12 when she saw them 3 dozen perfect white orchids in a crystal vase, being carried through the restaurant by a man in a black suit who definitely didn't work for any flower shop. The dining room went quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. The man walked directly to Ava, his face expressionless. Ava Williams? Her heart stopped. Every eye in the restaurant turned toward her. Yes, she managed, her voice barely audible. He set the vase on the nearest table and handed her a small envelope. Then he left without another word, leaving her standing there with trembling hands. Her manager, Richard, appeared at her elbow. Who the hell was that? Ava couldn't answer. She opened the envelope with shaking fingers, pulling out a card with elegant handwriting. You gave me more than my life back. Please let me thank you properly. M.H. Below it was a phone number. Oh my God, whispered Elena, one of the other waitresses, reading over her shoulder. Ava, do you know who M.H. is? But Ava was staring at the orchids, expensive and beautiful and terrifying, because flowers that cost more than her monthly rent weren't just a thank you. They were a declaration, a claim. She waited for another threatening call or text, but none came. Not that day. Not that evening. Just silence, which somehow felt worse. Like someone was waiting, watching. The card slipped from Ava's fingers, fluttering to the floor. Around her, the restaurant continued its elegant chaos, but all she could hear was her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Someone had warned her about Minho, but the man himself wanted to thank her. And now she had to decide which truth to believe. Minho walked into Celestial at exactly 2 o'clock, when the lunch rush was dying down, and the restaurant held that strange, suspended quiet before dinner prep began. He moved like a man who owned every space he entered. Tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie. His presence didn't announce itself. it commanded. Every conversation stopped. Ava was refilling water glasses at table 7 when she felt the shift in the room's energy, that electric charge that precedes lightning. She turned, and there he was, standing just inside the entrance, scanning the dining room until his gaze found her. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the pitcher. "Oh, hell no," Elena whispered beside her. "Ava, that's him. That's him." Richard, the manager, was already moving toward Minho with the kind of obsequious smile reserved for people who could buy the restaurant with pocket change. But Minho raised one hand slightly, stopping him mid-approach, and walked directly to Ava. The distance between them closed too fast. Suddenly he was there, standing close enough that she could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the exhaustion he wore like an expensive accessory. "Miss Williams," he said quietly, his accented English precise and careful. "May I have a moment of your time?" Her mouth went dry. The mysterious phone call from that night burned in her memory. "We'll be in touch." "I'm working," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll wait." He glanced at Richard, who looked like he might faint. "Is there somewhere private we could speak? I promise it won't take long." "Ava, you don't have to," Elena started, but Ava cut her off with a look, because the truth was, she had questions. About the orchids, about the phone call, about why someone else had called to warn her while he sent flowers. "The courtyard," she heard herself say. 5 minutes. Minho nodded once, then moved to wait near the glass doors that led to the restaurant's small outdoor space. Every employee watched him like he was a live grenade. Elena grabbed Ava's arm. "Are you insane? Do you know what he is?" "I know," Ava whispered. "But I need to understand what I've gotten myself into." When she stepped into the courtyard, Minho was standing by the fountain, hands in his pockets, looking more human than the headlines had ever made him seem. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, as she approached, maintaining a careful distance between them. "I wanted to apologize if the flowers caused you any trouble." "They caused a scene," Ava said, crossing her arms. "And I got a phone call. The night I saved you, someone who knew my name said they'd be in touch." She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes despite her fear. "Was that you?" Minho's expression darkened immediately. "No, I only learned your name yesterday morning." His voice took on an edge. "What exactly did they say?" "Just that they knew what I did. Nothing else." She watched him carefully. "You really didn't send that? I give you my word." His jaw tightened. "Someone threatening you because of me, that's unacceptable. But I need you to understand something. Not everyone in my world wants me protected. Some would prefer I'd died on that sidewalk." The implication settled between them, cold and heavy, "so I'm caught in the middle." Ava said quietly, "Not if I can help it." He pulled a business card from his pocket. Simple, elegant, with just a phone number and an address. "There's a tea house in Koreatown, Seonbi. 4 o'clock. Meet me there. Let me explain what's happening. Let me tell you the truth about what you've stepped into." Ava stared at the card in his outstretched hand. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to protect herself the way she'd learned to after Marcus died. But there was something in his gaze that matched what she'd seen that night on the pavement. Desperation, honesty, a kind of exhaustion that came from carrying too much weight alone. "I'll be there," she said, taking the card. "But I'm bringing pepper spray." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. I would expect nothing less. At 4:15, Ava sat across from Minho in a private room at Seonbi, traditional floor cushions beneath them, delicate cups of green tea steaming between them. The walls were rice paper screens that filtered the afternoon light into soft gold. She'd never been anywhere that felt so separate from the chaos of the city outside. "My mother used to bring me here," Minho said quietly, pouring tea with practiced grace. "Before she died, it's one of the few places I can still remember her clearly." Ava wrapped her hands around her cup, the warmth bleeding into her palms. "How old were you?" 12. He stared into his tea. "My father died a year later. I inherited an empire I didn't want and couldn't refuse. By 16, I was running it. By 20, I'd learned that being feared was safer than being loved." The rawness in his voice surprised her. This wasn't the crime lord from the news articles. This was someone who'd been crushed by circumstances beyond his control. "I lost my brother 3 years ago," Ava found herself saying. "My ex-boyfriend killed him, during a fight about me." The words came out jagged, like broken glass she'd swallowed. "I survived. Marcus didn't, and I've been terrified of dangerous men ever since." Minho's gaze met hers, and something passed between them: recognition, understanding. Two people carrying guilt they couldn't set down. "Then why did you save me?" he asked softly. "That night, you had to know I was dangerous." "Because you were dying," she said simply. "And I couldn't watch another person die when I had the power to stop it." The silence stretched, intimate and charged. "You see me as human," Minho said finally. "Not as a symbol or a threat. Do you know how rare that is?" Before Ava could answer, her cell phone rang, not a buzz, an actual call. She glanced at the screen. Nana. Her grandmother never called during the day unless something was wrong. She answered immediately. "Nana? What's?" "Baby." Her grandmother's voice was shaking. "There are men outside the building. Black car. They've been there for an hour. Mrs. Chen from 3B said they asked about you." Ava's blood turned to ice. She looked up at Minho, her voice breaking. "Someone's watching my grandmother right now." Minho was already standing, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean. His entire demeanor shifted from vulnerable to lethal in a heartbeat. He hung up and looked at her, determination in his gaze. "My men are 8 minutes away. They'll protect her." "How do I know they're not the ones threatening her?" Ava demanded, standing. "Because I just gave you my word." He stepped closer. "Whoever called you that first night, whoever is watching your grandmother, they don't work for me. They work for someone who wants to create distance between us. Someone who sees you as either leverage or a liability." "What does that mean?" Ava's voice rose. "It means there's a traitor in my organization," Minho said, his voice hard. "Someone who wants me dead. And they're using you to test my reactions, to see what you mean to me." "I don't mean anything to you," Ava protested. "I'm a stranger who—" "You're the first person in a decade who looked at me and didn't see a monster," Minho interrupted, his voice raw. "And now you're in danger because of it." Ava's phone rang again. Unknown number. With trembling fingers, she answered on speaker. "Miss Williams." Jung-Soo's voice, smooth as silk. "I apologize for the concern. Mr. Min's security team is simply ensuring your safety. But you should understand, getting close to my boss makes you visible, and visibility in our world is dangerous. I'd hate to see you or your grandmother hurt because of a simple act of kindness." The line went dead before either could respond. And Ava realized with horrifying clarity that saving Minho's life hadn't just pulled her into his world, it had painted a target on everyone she loved. But the real threat wasn't Minho. It was the man standing closest to him. Minho's men had surrounded Nana's building within 8 minutes. By the time Ava arrived, breathless and terrified, the watchers across the street had vanished. Her grandmother was safe, shaken but unharmed. "You can't go home," Minho said that night. "Not until I identify who's moving against me." Nana stayed with her church friend in Brooklyn, and Ava found herself in Minho's penthouse overlooking Central Park, temporary protection that felt anything but safe. The first 3 days, Ava barely left her room. The walls she'd built after Marcus's death felt thinner here, threatened by proximity to another dangerous man. She'd lie awake listening to Minho's footsteps in the hall, her body rigid, waiting for the violence she'd learned to expect. But it never came. Instead, on the 4th evening, she found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by Napa cabbage and Korean spices. "My mother's recipe," he said, when he noticed her in the doorway. "Kimchi. I thought you might be hungry." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in her chest. "Can I help?" she asked quietly. His smile was small but genuine. "I'd like that." They worked in careful silence, and when his hand brushed hers while reaching for the gochugaru, she didn't flinch. For the first time in years, a man's touch didn't make her want to run. By the 2nd week, something had shifted. The rituals of cooking became their language, his kimchi lessons, her grandmother's mac and cheese recipe, food as memory, as healing, as bridge between two broken people learning to trust again. Late one night, Ava found Minho on the balcony overlooking the city. He stood at the railing, whiskey in hand, looking like a man at war with himself. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, joining him. He didn't look at her. "I keep seeing their faces. Everyone I've hurt. Everyone who's been hurt because of me." His voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. "There's so much blood on my hands, Ava." She should have been afraid, should have walked away. But instead, she reached out and took his hand, the hand that had probably pulled triggers, signed death warrants, built an empire on violence. "I watched my brother die because I loved the wrong person," she whispered. "I blamed myself for 3 years, thought if I'd just been smarter, stronger, less trusting, he'd still be alive." Her voice cracked. "We're both prisoners of our pasts. But maybe we don't have to be." Min-ho turned to her, searching her face in the darkness. "I want to leave," he said suddenly. "All of it. The empire, the violence, the fear. I've been trying to find a way out for years, but I never had a reason strong enough to make it real." He stepped closer. "Until you, Min-ho. I'm serious. I have legitimate businesses, investments that could sustain me. I can liquidate the criminal operations, transfer power, walk away." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "You make me want to be someone worthy of the way you looked at me that night, like I was worth saving." Tears burned behind Ava's eyes. "It's not that simple. Your world doesn't just let people leave." "Then I'll fight my way out." His forehead rested against hers. "For the first time in my life, I have something worth fighting for." The kiss happened like gravity inevitable, desperate, tender and fierce all at once. His hands tangled in her hair, hers gripping his shirt like he was the only solid thing in a world tilting sideways. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the city glittered below them like scattered stars. "I'm falling for you," Ava whispered against his lips. "And it terrifies me." "Then we'll be terrified together," Min-ho murmured. But the next morning, everything shattered. Ava woke to shouting in Korean, to the sound of heavy footsteps and Min-ho's voice cutting through the penthouse like a blade. She threw on clothes and ran to the living room, where Min-ho stood surrounded by his men, all of them armed, all of them tense. Jung-soo stood near the window, his expression carefully controlled. "What's happening?" Ava demanded. Min-ho turned to her, and the look on his face stopped her cold. "The Nakamura brothers. They've taken over 3 of our distribution points. 5 of our people are dead." His jaw clenched. "And they're demanding a meeting. Tonight, or they start targeting families." "You can't go," Ava said immediately. "It's a trap. I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do. You. They mentioned you by name, Ava." Min-ho's voice was hollow. "They know you're here. They know what you mean to me. And if I don't show up, they've made it clear you're first." The room spun. This was her nightmare come to life, being the reason someone else walked into danger. Jung-soo spoke for the first time, his voice measured. "The Nakamuras are testing you, boss, seeing if you've gone soft. Maybe Miss Williams should relocate until this is resolved, for everyone's safety." Min-ho's eyes cut to Jung-soo with sudden intensity. "That won't be necessary. I'll handle the Nakamuras." His tone left no room for argument. And Ava realized with bone-deep certainty that the man she'd fallen for was about to walk into something that could destroy them both, all because she'd saved his life. For 3 days, Min-ho disappeared into meetings with his remaining loyal men, building a strategy to deal with the Nakamura threat. The weight of his empire crushed down on him, visibly new lines appearing around his eyes, his jaw perpetually tight. On the 4th day, he found her on the balcony at sunset. "Come with me tonight," he said, and there was something desperate in his voice. "I need to breathe, to remember why I'm doing this." The private art exhibition was held in a converted warehouse in Koreatown, invitation only. Min-ho moved through it like a ghost, his hand firm on the small of Ava's back. She wore a simple black dress he'd had delivered elegant enough that she didn't feel completely out of place among the champagne and designer suits. Still, she caught the stares. A black woman on the arm of Min-ho. The whispers followed them. "Ignore them," Min-ho murmured. "You're the only person here who matters." He guided her through rooms of contemporary Korean art until he found what he'd been searching for. He stopped so suddenly she nearly stumbled. The painting was massive, dominating the wall. A lotus flower in full bloom, impossibly white and perfect, rising from dark, churning water. "This," Minho said softly. "This is you." Ava turned to look at him, confused. "A flower?" "No." He faced her, his expression raw, beauty rising from impossible conditions. Something pure that grew in darkness and refused to be corrupted by it. His hand came up to brush her cheek. "You survived violence, loss, grief, and somehow you still see humanity in a man like me." Tears pricked her eyes. "Minho, I don't deserve you," he continued, "but you make me believe I could become someone who does." Before she could respond, she felt it the prickling sensation of being watched. She turned her head slightly and saw them, 3 men in dark suits across the gallery, their attention fixed on Minho. On her, the air changed, became charged with violence. "Minho," she whispered. He'd already seen them. His entire body went rigid, one hand moving to the small of his back where she knew he kept a gun. "Walk toward the exit." Slowly. "Not without you." Ava, one of the men, started moving toward them, pushing through the crowd with predatory intent. Minho grabbed Ava's hand and pulled her toward the emergency exit, speaking rapid Korean into his phone. Behind them, chaos erupted, shouts, screams, the sound of something crashing. They burst through the exit into an alley, rain pouring down in sheets. Minho's car was already there, engine running. They dove into the back seat and the car peeled out, tires screeching on wet asphalt. "Were those the Nakamuras?" Ava gasped. "They're men. Sending a message that you're visible now. Marked." Minho pulled her close, his hands shaking as they framed her face. "I'm sorry. God. Ava, I'm so sorry." "Don't." She grabbed his wrists. "I chose this. I chose you." He kissed her then, desperate and fierce, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they broke apart, rain streaking the windows around them, she saw fear in his gaze for the first time. "I'm terrified of losing you," Ava whispered. "After Marcus, I swore I'd never let myself care about anyone who lived in danger. And now," her voice broke, "now I'm falling in love with someone whose world wants him dead." "Then I'll leave it." Minho's grip tightened on her. "I mean it. I've already started liquidating assets, transferring legitimate holdings into separate accounts. I have lawyers working on exit strategies. I won't let this life destroy you. I won't let our love end in tragedy." "Can you really walk away?" Ava asked. "Will they let you?" "I'll make them let me. Whatever it takes." The car pulled up to a secured location, not Nana's building, but a safe house Minho maintained. Everything looked quiet, peaceful, until his phone vibrated. Not a call, a text. Minho opened it, and his face went white. He showed Ava the screen. A photo. Jung-soo with a man Ava didn't recognize, both smiling at a restaurant table. Timestamp, 3 months ago. The message below was simple. "Your second-in-command has been working with Takeshi Nakamura since summer. The poisoning was his idea. He's coming for your empire, and he'll use the girl to take it. A friend." And Ava realized that the man who'd been standing beside Minho all along was the one who'd been orchestrating everything, the poisoning, the threats, the art gallery attack. The enemy had been inside their walls the entire time. "Jung-soo," Minho whispered, staring at the photo. "It's been Jung-soo all along." "Who sent this?" Ava demanded. Minho dialed a number, spoke briefly in Korean, then hung up. "One of my older lieutenants. Someone Jung-soo thought was loyal to him, but who's actually been watching him for months. He's gathered evidence meetings, money transfers, communication with the Nakamuras. So Jung-soo poisoned you, tried to use me as leverage, and has been working with your enemies this whole time." Ava felt sick. "Yes, and tonight he thinks I'm walking into a trap. The Nakamura meeting, it's his play to finish me off." Minho's expression turned to steel. "But now I know, and I'm going to end this." "How?" "By giving him exactly what he wants. Me, vulnerable and alone." Minho looked at her. "But I need you somewhere safe first." What followed was 12 hours of preparation. Minho moved Nana to a location even his inner circle didn't know about. He pulled together his most trusted men, those who'd served his father before Jung-soo's time, and he walked into the Nakamura meeting knowing it was a trap. But it was Jung-soo's trap he sprang. When the firefight erupted at the warehouse in Red Hook, Minho's hidden security team moved in. Not to save him from the Nakamuras, but to catch Jung-soo in the act of betrayal, documented, recorded, with the Nakamuras testifying that Jung-soo had orchestrated the entire coup in exchange for control of Minho's territory. But Jung-soo escaped in the chaos, vanished. Ava sat in the secure apartment, watching the news coverage, when Minho finally returned, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. "It's not over," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Jung-soo got away, and he has nothing left to lose." "What does that mean?" "It means he'll come for us. For you. To hurt me before he goes down." Minho's grip tightened. "I'm done with this life, Ava. All of it. I've contacted the FBI. I'm willing to testify against the Nakamuras, to give them everything they need to dismantle the Yakuza operations in New York. In exchange, we get immunity, protection, a way out." Tears streamed down Ava's face. "You'd do that?" "It was never worth anything," he whispered. "Not until you." And standing there, covered in his blood and her tears, they made a choice, to leave the darkness behind, to build something new. But Jung-soo was still out there, still dangerous, still coming. 2 weeks later, with the FBI deal in motion and Jung-soo still at large, Minho found Ava on the balcony at sunset. "Come with me tonight," he said. "I have something to show you." "Minho, with Jung-soo still out there, I have security, and I need you to trust me. I need this moment with you." The rooftop garden belonged to a building Minho owned in Tribeca, 30 stories above the city. When the elevator doors opened, Ava gasped. Traditional Korean lanterns hung from invisible wires, casting warm red and gold light across the space. White roses, her grandmother's favorites, filled planters along the edges. The city sprawled below them, a living tapestry of light and life. "Minho!" her voice caught. "What is this?" He took her hand, leading her to the center of the rooftop. "I've spent my entire life running an empire I never wanted," he began. "Building something out of violence and fear because that's what I inherited. What I thought I deserved." He squeezed her hand. "And then you appeared. This woman who saved my life for no reason except that it was the right thing to do, who looked at a monster and saw a man." "You're not a monster," Ava whispered. "I've done monstrous things." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But you make me believe I can be someone different, someone worthy of the way you look at me." He released her hand and reached into his jacket, pulling out a small velvet box. Ava's heart stopped completely as he lowered himself to one knee. "I'm leaving this world, all of it. The FBI deal is nearly done, the businesses are clean, and I'm walking away from everything that came before you." He opened the box, revealing a ring that took her breath away, a brilliant diamond surrounded by jade stones that gleamed like water in moonlight. "Ava Williams, you are my redemption, my reason, my future. Will you let me love you for the rest of—" The explosion of gunfire shattered the moment. Glass erupted from the rooftop access door as armed men burst through. Ava's scream was lost in the chaos as Minho threw himself over her, both of them hitting the ground behind a planter. "Stay down!" he shouted, his gun already in his hand. More men poured from the stairwell, Nakamura's remaining forces, making one last desperate play before the FBI closed in. They were trapped on a rooftop with nowhere to run. Minho returned fire, precise and controlled, but they were outnumbered. "The south exit!" Minho grabbed her arm. "There's a fire escape. And leave you?" Ava shouted over the gunfire. "No, Ava, please." "No." She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her even as bullets whined past. "I'm not running. Not from this. Not from you." Something shifted in his eyes, surprise, fear, hope, all tangled together. "Then stay behind me," he commanded. The firefight intensified. Minho's security team burst onto the roof from the building below, engaging the attackers, the air filled with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. And then, in the chaos, in the absolute madness of violence and fear, she realized something. This was who he was. This darkness. This danger. But it was also the man who'd taught her to make kimchi, who'd promised to leave everything behind for her, who was literally shielding her body with his own. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. 5 attackers down. Minho's men securing the perimeter, sirens wailing in the distance. Minho turned to her, his hands shaking as they framed her face. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple. "Are you hurt?" "No." Her voice was surprisingly steady. "Ask me again." "What?" "Ask me again." She reached down, picking up the ring box from where it had fallen, miraculously intact. "You didn't finish." Minho stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. But standing there, covered in dust and fear and adrenaline, Ava had never been more certain of anything. "Will you marry me?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Yes." She grabbed his hand, pulling him closer. "Yes, I choose you. All of you, the darkness and the light, the past and the future. Yes." He kissed her then, desperate and fierce, the ring forgotten in her hand as they held each other in the wreckage of his proposal. When they finally broke apart, Minho slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly. "I love you," he said. "God, Ava. I love you too," she whispered. As the FBI and NYPD swarmed the building, as the last of Nakamura's network was rounded up, Minho and Ava stood together at the rooftop's edge, watching the city lights below. Jung-soo was still out there. But for the first time, they weren't running from the past. They were choosing their future. "It's done," Agent Chen said 3 days later, shaking Minho's hand in the FBI office. "Nakamura and his lieutenants are in federal custody. With your testimony, we've dismantled the largest Yakuza operation on the East Coast. The deal stands. You're out." Minho's eyes found Ava across the room. She was talking with Nana, both of them safe, alive, whole. That was the only out that mattered. "What about Jung-soo?" Ava asked. Chen's expression darkened. "Still at large, but with his network destroyed and warrants in 3 countries, he won't get far. We'll find him." "Marry me," Minho said that night, pulling Ava onto the penthouse balcony. "Now. This week. I don't want to wait." "We just got engaged 3 days ago during a gunfight," Ava laughed. "Minho, we should. I've spent 30 years living in tomorrow." He interrupted, taking her hands. "Planning, strategizing, waiting for the right moment. But you taught me that life happens now, and I want to start ours now." She looked at him, this man who'd fought his way out of darkness for her, and felt her last reservation dissolve. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do it." 5 days later, on a crisp November afternoon, they stood in the garden of a small venue in Brooklyn, surrounded by 40 people who'd witnessed their impossible journey. Ava wore a scarlet and gold hanbok for the first part of the ceremony. Minho stood across from her in a black dopo and gat, his eyes never leaving hers, full of wonder and disbelief. The Paibik ceremony was intimate. Ava and Minho bowed to Nana first, offering her jujubes and chestnuts. Tears streamed down Nana's face. "You saved each other," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Now you save each other every day. That's what marriage is." Then came the second ceremony. Ava changed into an ivory gown. Minho wore a tailored black suit, looking less like a former crime boss and more like a man who'd finally found his purpose. Pastor Williams officiated. Before them lay a decorated broom, the African-American tradition Nana had insisted on. "These 2 people have walked through fire," Pastor Williams said, "literally and figuratively. They've faced death, betrayal, violence, and fear, and they chose each other anyway." Minho's vows came first. "Ava, you saved my life on a sidewalk in the rain. But more than that, you saved my soul. You looked at me and saw someone worth saving. I promise to spend every day proving you were right. I promise to protect your heart the way you protected mine, with courage, compassion, and unwavering love. I promise to build something beautiful with you from all our broken pieces." Ava's throat tightened. "Minho, I was so afraid before you. Afraid to trust. Afraid to love. Afraid to believe that happiness was meant for someone like me. You showed me that strength isn't in avoiding pain, it's in choosing love despite it. I promise to walk beside you, not behind or ahead, but always together. I promise to see your humanity even when the world tries to show me your past. I promise to be your safe place, the way you've become mine." When Pastor Williams told them to jump the broom, they did it together, hands clasped, faces alight with joy and relief and the intoxicating freedom of survival. The reception was a beautiful chaos of cultures. Korean barbecue alongside Nana's mac and cheese, jazz playing between K-pop tracks. Min-ho pulled Ava close during their first dance, Ella Fitzgerald's voice wrapping around them like silk. "We made it," she whispered against his chest. "We made it," he confirmed, his lips brushing her temple. For the first time in months, no threats came. No phone calls, no danger, just peace, hard-won and precious. The honeymoon took them first to Seoul. Minho's family, who'd rejected him when he took over the criminal operations, now welcomed him home with open arms. "You finally did it," his cousin Ji-hoon said, embracing Min-ho at Incheon Airport. "You left that world. Welcome back." Seoul was a revelation. Ava fell in love with the way ancient temples sat beside glass skyscrapers, the explosion of flavors in traditional markets. Min-ho took her to Bukchon Hanok village where his mother had grown up, to the temple where she'd prayed, to the small restaurant where she'd learned to cook. "She would have loved you," Min-ho's aunt said one evening. She always said Min-ho needed someone strong enough to save him from himself. On their 6th day in Seoul, Min-ho's phone rang early in the morning. He answered in Korean, listened,